Have you ever walked through your school after dark? The classrooms feel colder. The hallways seem longer. Every sound, every creak, every flicker of light feels wrong, as if the building itself is alive. Across the world, there are schools where people swear the walls hold secrets. Whispers in the locker rooms, messages scrawled on chalkboards that no one wrote, and basements echoing with screams from decades past. These aren't ghost stories from old castles. They happened in ordinary schools, just like yours. Tonight, you'll hear 3 of the most disturbing true school horror stories ever told. Every school has one classroom that feels different. Not because of the teacher or the subject, but because of the atmosphere. Students avoid it when they can, whisper rumors about it, and swear the air inside feels heavier. This story comes from such a room. A modest classroom tucked at the far end of a hallway, close to a stairwell that students rarely used. By day, it looked ordinary enough. A blackboard at the front, rows of desks, a cabinet full of dusty textbooks. But at night, the classroom seemed alive. It started with the lights. Security guards on patrol noticed that, even after shutting everything off, the lights in that room would flicker back on. Sometimes dim, sometimes full brightness. At first, they assumed it was faulty wiring, but when electricians were called in, they found nothing wrong. The bulbs were new, the wiring stable, yet the lights continued their strange behavior. Then came the writing. Every morning, the teachers found words scribbled on the chalkboard. Not lessons, not math problems, just a single phrase, repeated over and over. Still here. They erased it, locked the door, and left. But the next morning, it was back. Sometimes in large, shaky letters, sometimes small and neat, always the same words. Still here. Rumors spread quickly among students. Some said a child had died in that room years ago during detention. Others claimed it was built over an old cemetery. Teachers dismissed the stories, but the strange events continued. One janitor gave the most chilling account. Late at night, while cleaning, he heard the sound of chairs scraping across the floor. Thinking some students had snuck back in, he opened the door. The room was empty, but all the chairs had moved. They were no longer lined up in neat rows, but gathered in a circle facing inward, as though an invisible class was still meeting. He swore he heard a giggle, faint but unmistakable. It echoed across the room, bouncing off the walls. Yet no one was there. He locked the door behind him and refused to ever clean that classroom again. The school eventually stopped using the room. The desks were left covered in dust, the chalkboard untouched. But every now and then, when staff are forced to walk by at night, they glance through the small window in the door. And some say they still see it. The faint glow of the lights and words scrawled across the board. Still here. The school gym was a place of noise and energy during the day. Shouting players, squeaking shoes, the echo of bouncing basketballs. But when the final whistle blew and the lights went out, the silence was suffocating. Beneath the gym, the locker rooms sat in darkness. Rows of metal lockers stretched endlessly, mirrors cracked and foggy, pipes dripping water onto the cold concrete floor. It was here that one of the strangest stories unfolded. The janitor assigned to night duty often worked alone. He didn't mind until one evening when something unusual happened. As he pushed his mop across the locker room tiles, he heard it, a faint whisper. At first, he thought it was the sound of water dripping, but then the whisper grew clearer. It wasn't just noise, it was his name. He froze. The air felt heavy, pressing down on him. Then the lockers began to shake. The metal doors rattled violently, slamming as if someone, or something, was trapped inside. Summoning his courage, he approached. His flashlight beam quivered as he reached for the handle of the loudest locker. Slowly, he pulled it open. Cold air poured out, colder than the winter night outside. His breath fogged instantly. But the locker was empty. Just a dark, hollow space. The whispers stopped. Silence fell. Then, from the very back of the row, another locker began to rattle. louder this time. He ran, dropping his mop and leaving the lights on. The next morning, staff found the locker room in disarray. Doors hanging open, water pooled across the floor, and mirrors shattered. The janitor never returned to that job. He told others he had no explanation, only that the whispers knew his name, and they weren't human. Today, students say the locker room is cursed. Some swear if you stand in front of a mirror and whisper your name, you'll hear it whispered back by a voice that doesn't belong to you. Every school has a place students dare each other to enter. For this school, it was the basement. Down a narrow stairwell, through a heavy metal door, it stretched into darkness. Few dared to stay long. Decades ago, a fire consumed part of the school. Some students and staff didn't make it out. In the aftermath, the school stored the records of the tragedy in the basement. Charred photos, burnt wood fragments, boxes of reports. Over time, those files gathered dust, locked away and forgotten. But the basement wasn't empty. Students who sneaked inside reported strange sounds, footsteps echoing, but with no one there. Faint screams carried through the walls, cold gusts of air that smelled of smoke and ash. One night, the school's security cameras caught something unexplainable. On the feed, shadows moved across the basement floor, but when guards checked, the room was empty. Not a single person inside. Worse, the boxes of fire records were no longer stacked neatly. They were scattered, pages torn out and rearranged. And on the floor, spelled out in burnt papers, was a single message. "Help me." The basement was locked after that. Staff were forbidden from entering, but students claimed that if you stand near the basement door and press your ear against it, you'll hear it. Faint, desperate screams echoing from the past. Some believe the souls of those lost in the fire are trapped down there, reliving their final moments again and again. Others think something darker lives in the ashes, waiting for anyone foolish enough to step inside. Either way, the basement door remains locked. But the echoes, they never stopped. Classrooms, locker rooms, basements. They're not abandoned graveyards or haunted castles. They're everyday places we've all walked through. Maybe that's what makes these stories so disturbing. When we imagine horror, we think of remote houses in the woods, old asylums, or cursed villages. But true fear is realizing the places we thought were safe, the very places we grew up in, can hide something darker. The classroom that wouldn't stay empty. The locker room whispers that called out names. The basement echoes of a fire long past. 3 schools, 3 stories. Each a reminder that history leaves traces and not all of them fade. So the next time you walk down an empty hallway with fluorescent lights buzzing above you, ask yourself, is it just the building settling? Or is something else waiting for you to notice it? Because sometimes the scariest ghosts aren't in haunted houses. They're right where we least expect them, inside our schools, and they're still here.